All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my class. Welcome back to OneClass. Let me try that again. My name is Kevin, and I'm going to be teaching some economics today. A little bit of background about me. I hold both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in economics, and I also work as an economist on a day-to-day basis. Today I'm going to walk you through 10 or 12 questions or so. I'm going to review the answers that our junior tutors have written and add anything else on that I think might be useful. So without further ado, we can get going here. Just make sure this is working. It looks like it is. So question 1 reads as follows. Shows that Hank sells 200 cookies per day at a price of 0.5 each, 50 cents each. If he incurs a daily total fixed cost of $40 and a daily average variable cost of 20 cents, Hank's daily economic profits equal to. And what our junior tutor has written? What our junior tutor has written is that economic benefits numerically are equivalent to total revenue minus implicit expense minus explicit expenses. So, similar to bookkeeping benefit, financial benefit considers certain costs like open door costs. Express expenses are a cost that straightforwardly accumulates to someone. Here, there are two unequivocal expenses, fixed expense and variable expense. We have to search for any data or information that can point towards an open door cost or some other certain expense. In the inquiry anyway, there's no data about what else Hank could have finished with the 200 treats he sells ordinarily. Any elective utilization of treats can be decided from the given data. There's additionally no investment funds rate at which he could have spared the fixed and variable expenses. So here we have no understood expenses. The economic benefit will be the same as the bookkeeping benefit. And what he's written, and this is correct, is that the economic benefits is going to equal total revenue. Total revenue get ugly, bear with me, minus total costs. And in this case, we have two costs that contribute to the total cost. And those are our fixed cost and our variable cost. Shrink that a bit, but still keep it in the top corner. And from there, we can start plugging in the numbers we've been given. So our benefit is going to equal our total revenue. So we sell 200 cookies a day at a price of 50 cents each. So total revenue is going to be those 200 cookies times 50 cents that they're sold for, minus our total costs. And our total costs are going to be the $40 fixed cost. This is likely for things like paying for the permit to keep his cookie stand on the road, or the electricity that it costs to keep his cookie stand open, things of that nature. And the average variable cost, so that is the 200 cookies times 0.2. Use the dot there to symbolize multiplication. 200 times 0.2 per cookie. So 200 times 0.5. Got the decimal there, sorry. 200 times 0.5 is going to equal 100. We can distribute the minus sign here. So we're going to say negative 40 for the fixed cost and minus another 40 for the variable cost. 200 times 0.2 is 40. And therefore our benefit is going to equal $100 minus 40 minus 40 for a grand total of $20. This is an let me try that again. This is an excellent explanation in here, although perhaps a little wordy at parts. I think what our junior tutor was essentially trying to get at, the economic benefit will typically include opportunity costs. But in this case, there was nothing in the question about opportunity costs, so we can effectively dismiss them. Given that we've dismissed those, we can basically say that our economic benefit is going to be the profit. That is going to be the total revenue minus the total costs. And our total costs are made up of the fixed costs plus our virtual cost. I'll give you guys a quick second to take a picture of that. I know my face is in the top right corner, so I'll make sure you guys can see it. Cool. And with that, we can move on to question 2. The change in total utility after each additional unit of consumption is called A, satisfaction, B, value, C, marginal utility, or D, the benefit. And the correct answer is C, marginal utility. That is correct. I'll add a bit of an explanation. You may have heard in your economics classes that economists think at the margins, and essentially what that means is that we always think of what would happen if we added one more or took away one less of whatever it is we're talking about. So marginal utility, say this is our curve. If we're talking about this point, then the marginal utility will be the utility gained from moving from this point to 0.1 unit over. Oh, let me try that again. So whatever utility we gain, from moving this 1 unit over, the marginal utility is going to be the utility we gain from this 1 additional unit. It's probably the quantity or whatever. You'll also hear about diminishing marginal returns and what that looks like. Sorry, this is still number 2. And what diminishing marginal returns looks like is as we have more of something, the additional utility we get from each additional unit becomes less. So for example, if you have $0 and I were to give you $100, that would lead to a big increase in utility because it's going to make a very big difference for you. But if you're Jeff Bezos and you have all the money in the world and I give you another $100, that is a drop in the ocean and it doesn't bring you really any extra marginal utility. I think technically I should say it brings you the smallest little amount of extra marginal utility. But so I say it's correct. And with that, we can move on to question 3. And question 3 is, where's the formula for marginal cost? And what our junior tutor has written. The formula for marginal cost is going to be the change in cost. Here we use delta, which is a little triangle, to denote cost. And we can divide that by change in quantity. I believe this is right. I haven't thought about this in a long time. Yeah, we'll double check just in case, but I'm sure this is the correct formula. Voila, our junior tutor also has Google. Excellent. Trying to think if there's anything I should add to that one. Not really. With that, we can move on to question 4. And question 4 reads as follows. What is a perfect competition? And our junior tutor has written that perfect competition is a type of market structure where no imbalance or imperfection is present in the market. This means that there are a large number of sellers and buyers in the market, which removes the possibility of having an oligopoly or monopoly. Of course, in a monopoly, there's only one producer. In an oligopoly, there's only a few. In perfect competition, problem of asymmetric information is also not present because, in this kind of market structure, both the buyers and the sellers have equal access to all information. And this is correct. I'm going to go through maybe the characteristics of perfect competition. So I'm going to say perfect competition. Let's move this up here because I know my face gets in the way. So a perfect competition is that there is going to be many buyers and many sellers, as our junior tutor mentioned there. Many buyers and sellers. There is going to be, and this is maybe the most important one, a homogeneous product. And the reason I say that this is maybe the most important one is just because this is what differentiates it really from monopolistic competition. So when there's a homogeneous product, it means everybody is selling the exact same thing. An example of this is like mushrooms. Like if you went to the grocery store and an equal size pack of mushrooms was $4 from one company, but $2 from another, you're obviously going to go with the $2 version because all mushrooms are pretty much the same, and you don't expect an increase in quality by buying one brand over another. With monopolistic competition, they don't have homogeneous products, so they can differentiate their products from one another. An example of like monopolistic competition is like restaurants. So, they're all serving food, but, like, or even more specifically, there's many restaurants that serve burgers, but sometimes you want a cheap burger and you can go to McDonald's. Other times you want something more expensive and maybe you're going to go to the Works and sit down. So they have the same product, but it's differentiated. There is free entry and exits. In other words, there are no barriers to entry. Barriers to entry are consistent with a monopoly. There's a couple different types of barriers to entry, which is natural barriers, technological barriers, etc. So free entry and exit. There is, I believe, perfect information. Is it written somewhere? Yes, perfect information. This means that both buyers and sellers don't have any information that would affect the transaction that the other side doesn't have. An example of this is, say, when you order an Uber, the driver can see your rating and you can see the driver's rating. So if a lot of people have gone with your driver, you're not worried about getting kidnapped. And if your driver can see that you have a high rating, they're not worried about you wrecking their car. What else? I think there's one more. Two more, actually. Another characteristic is that all firms are price takers. I'll draw the long run graph in a minute and show you how that is. All firms are price takers. What that means is that firms don't have any ability to influence the price. So kind of back to my mushroom example from a minute ago. If a new firm wanted to come into the mushroom selling industry and price their mushrooms way more than competing brands, they wouldn't have any success in the market because nobody would buy their mushrooms. You have to be a price taker. And lastly, there are no transaction costs. What this means is that there's no price to actually performing the transaction. There's just the transaction itself. Transaction costs are typical of like going to court over something. So to achieve what you want, to have the legal battle, you need to pay a lawyer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll just kind of downsize that, move it up here. Hopefully, guys, you can still see it okay. Long run chart I can draw. We've got quantity on the x-axis and price on the y-axis. And we remember that firms are price takers. So we have a horizontal demand curve equal to the average revenue. We've got an average total cost that is U-shaped. It's actually a pretty good drawing. And firms are going to produce at the point where the marginal cost equals the average total cost equals the demand. So we can call this Q star. We can call this P star. And we can say that this is our equilibrium. Perfect. Give me a second to see if there's anything else I wanted to add to that. Don't think there is though. So over the long run, just going to downsize this again a little bit. Over the long run, firms can make a profit when price is greater than the average total cost. So firms can make a profit when price is greater than the average total cost because more firms will enter the market, so the price is driven down, and the profits are zero. So for example, if, I guess there's no example to add to that. I'll just repeat it one more time. In the long run, if firms make profits, then more firms enter the market until the price is driven down, and profits would again become zero. So we'll give you guys a minute to take a picture of that. Here's the solution. And we can now move on to the next question, number 5, I think. Number 5, the law of diminishing returns states that as one input variable is increased, there is a point at which A, the marginal per unit output decreases, B, the marginal per unit output is 0, C, the marginal per unit output is negative, and D, nothing is produced. Our junior tutor said that the correct answer is A, the marginal per unit output decreases, and they said that the law of diminishing marginal returns states that as we continue to add more of any one input, its marginal product will eventually decline. That's correct, and I did go over this before, but I think OneClass cuts the videos together, so I will go over it again. So first, I'll draw a graph. I want to make sure I'm getting the axes right. I think I am, though. Nobody's labeling their axes. That's annoying. Regardless, we can say the law of diminishing returns states that as one input variable is increased, there's a point at which the marginal per unit output decreases. So as you saw kind of in the graphs there, first down here, we're going to have a higher slope than we do, say, up here. And what I'm doing is just taking a point tangent to the line at both of these locations. A good example of this is what I said earlier, that being that if I give somebody with no money at all, $100, it's going to make a large difference to them. Say in this point, we can talk about the law of diminishing returns to utility. So I guess actually I can label this money. And I can say utility. So yeah, at this low point where you don't have a lot of money, say here, this is somebody with $500, something like that, to their name. By giving them an extra couple of dollars, here, we'll do it adding $500. So that's 500, call this a grand. So if somebody starts out with $500 and you give them another $500, as shown here on the x-axis, we can see this large increase in utility, and over here. And say there's a break in my graph here. And at this point here, we've got somebody like Jeff Bezos, somebody very rich. Don't remember Jeff Bezos' net worth off the top of my head. Hurts my feelings to look at. But oh, that's ugly now. You know, if we've got somebody over here that is worth $3 billion, and we increase their net worth. As for the scale of things here, just bear with me. It's a general concept I'm trying to illustrate. If we increase their net worth an extra $500, you know, we might see that their utility only increases by this very small difference up here. Very small increase in utility from another $500 when you're already that rich. So when you don't have much, this same amount of money means a lot to you, as illustrated here. But when you've already amassed a lot of money, it means a lot less in the future. That's correct. I'd say I'd give you guys a minute to take a picture of that chart, but it's hideous, so you probably don't even want it. we can move on here to question 6. And question 6 reads, what is the production possibilities curve? Janine The Tutor has written that the production possibilities curve illustrates a two-good economy by having the production of one good on the x-axis and another on the y-axis. The combinations that are produced by using the best technology and resources available make up the curve. Any points inside the PPC reflect inefficiencies with production, and any points outside the PPC cannot be obtained with the given resources technology. Thus, economic growth on the PPC is illustrated by an outward shift of the curve. So here they're referring to it as a PPC, production possibilities curve. How I had always known it was as the production possibilities frontier. Same thing, just wanted to make sure anybody watching isn't confused by that. And what I'm going to do here is graph a production possibilities frontier for us. Perfectly straight line. Don't want to hear anything else about it. And too good economy, so maybe like we're producing like, I don't know, like shoes and shirts. So you're always going to draw a production possibilities frontier, bowed out, like so. It's probably my best curved line of the day. And what this line represents is essentially any two combinations, any point in this line represents an attainable combination of the two goods. So, you know, I'm going to draw a couple points here, maybe 1, 2, 3. And I'm also going to draw one outside the PPF and one inside the PPF. Call this A, B, C, D, and E up here. I'm just going to downsize this a bit so I can do some writing. So a good at point A, or more broadly, any good within the PPF. So anything inside the bowed out PPF is attainable. You can definitely have it, but it's inefficient because you could have had a whole lot more. So it's attainable, but inefficient. So say at this point you can get like one pair of shoes and like one shirt. But points B, C, and D, which are actually on the line, are what we would call Pareto efficient, or technically efficient. Definition of Pareto efficiency, more broadly, not even just specifically in this example. Something is Pareto efficient when you cannot make one more person better off without making someone worse off. And every point on the line is Pareto efficient. So we've got, you know, 3 different points here. B, C, and D. And let's say at B, you can get 2 shirts and like, no, sorry, 2 shoes, pardon me, and like 8 shirts. Point C, you can get 4 shoes and call it 6 shirts. Or point D, you know, you can get 6 shoes, and 2 shirts. All 3 of these points, and more broadly, any point on this line, are Pareto efficient or technically efficient. So, the kind of the difference between them is, say, if you prefer point B, then you've got 8 shirts and 2 pairs of shoes, but you think to yourself, well, actually, no, I would like more pairs of shoes. You cannot obtain more pairs of shoes unless you give up some shirts. So you cannot get better off in the category of shoes without becoming worse off in the category of shirts. That's what makes it Pareto efficient. And lastly, we've got point E way out here. It's about to get cramped. And say at point E, there is 10 shirts and 8 pairs of shoes. Point E, we say that point E is preferable to both A, B, C, and D. However, it is unattainable. And I believe our junior tutor made a good comment about this in their little write-up here. So I'll just take a look at that quickly. They said, how they said it here is that any points outside of the PPC, or as I was taught, PPF, cannot be obtained with the given resources and technology. Thus, economic growth on a PPC is illustrated by an outward shift of the curve. So if there was economic growth, maybe technology becomes more efficient, or there's an increase in the supply of labor, and as a result, output would increase. We could then, let's fudge this graph even further. What that would look like would be the PPF expanding outwards, maybe something like this. If that were the case, then E now becomes the Pareto efficient point. And A, B, C, and D become the attainable but inefficient points. And of course, all of this assumes that we've got rational consumers who prefer more to less, etc. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to add to that. Probably not. Answer, that's correct. I'll give you guys a second to take a picture of that, and then we can carry on with the lesson. Moving on, this is question 7 here. And question 7 reads as follows. Equilibrium price is the price at which quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded. In other words, at the equilibrium price, the market has the same number of items that it is willing to sell with the number of items that people are willing to buy. So I'm going to draw a graph that I'm sure everybody has seen before. Okay, we're going to try those lines again. It's tough to look at. There we go, home run. So kind of the standard economics graph is we've got quantity on the x-axis and price on the y-axis. And we're going to graph our supply, which slopes upwards, and our demand, which slopes downwards. And the point at which they cross is what we're going to call our equilibrium price. We would draw the corresponding point on the x-axis, denote it Q star. And similarly for the y-axis, we would call this P star. So the equilibrium price can change when there are changes to either the supply or the demand. So say our supply curve were to shift out, call that S prime, were to shift out, we would have a new equilibrium price denoted by where the new supply meets demand. Call that Q prime and P prime. So as we can see, if the supply were to increase for whatever reason, then the result would be an increase in the quantity demanded, quantity available, and a decrease in the price it costs. Similarly, if I erase that real quick, if demand were to change, we'll say that if demand for a good were to increase, we'll call that D prime. We would see that as a result. And sorry, I should probably say that like if demand were to increase holding supply constant, or supply were to increase holding demand constant, this is with the change of one good. We can see that an increase in the demand, shifting the demand curve to the right, would also increase the quantity, as it did when the supply curve moved to the right, but it would increase the price instead of decreasing it, like what happened with our supply change. Of course, both can also shift at the same time. Oh, no, please stay there. This is actually a good point and was on a couple of my undergrad exams, I think. If demand has increased and supply also is increased, they might ask, what is the effect on the price? And the answer is going to be that it's ambiguous, because if the supply increases by less than the demand increased, then we might end up at this point here. It's going to get messy, by the way. End up at that point there, where the price is going to increase compared to the original value, or say the supply increases by a lot, we might see that the price is actually going to be lower than the original value was. So when both the supply and the demand increase, the effect can either be that the price rises, the price stays the same, or the price falls. However, the effect will always be on quantity, that quantity increases. Oh, and they've already drawn this for us. See the sample graph, line D represents the demand curve, and line S represents the supply curve. The equilibrium price is where the supply curve and demand curve intersect. Point A there. Point A, where they intersect, tells us that the price is $6, the quantity supplied is 60, and the quantity demanded is 60 as well. Therefore, $6 is the equilibrium price. Say, excellent write-up. The graph is a touch. Keep up the good work. I don't think I have anything else to add, so we can move forward to question 8 here. Second. What does scarcity mean in economics? And what our junior tutor's written here is that scarcity refers to the shortage of resources that are needed to produce goods and services in order to satisfy people's wants. And that is correct. A good definition to remember that is, at least I was tested on like I think many times in first year, maybe like 3 or 4 different like junior undergrad courses, is what is the actual definition of economics? And economics is going to be the study. I don't remember, mess this up. The study of how to best allocate meaning divide, divvy up, etc., budgets. Study of how to best allocate societies, scarce resources. I bring this up, one, because it may help you on a test, and two, because scarcity is a core part of the definition of economics. Oops. Scarce resources. A pretty prominent example of scarce resources would be fossil fuels, of course, as we are in a climate crisis. So, definition of economics. And yeah, simple question, simple answer. I think our junior tutor nails it here. So, say good answer. That's correct. Move on to question. I think I have 12 questions, maybe 11. But we can move on to question 9 here. And we're asked, what is the income elasticity of demand? What our junior tutor has written is that in economics, income elasticity of demand is referred as the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a commodity with respect to the change in the income of a consumer, ceteris paribus, pardon me. I'm going to write that because I was like 5 years into studying economics before I actually knew what it meant. I guess it's Latin, so it's awesome that economists are still using a dead language in their day-to-day work. Ceteris paribus means all else being equal. Yeah, I fully just ignored it every time I read it for the first like 5 years of studying economics. Back to the answer. So in economics, income elasticity of demand is referred to as the degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a commodity with respect to the change in income of a consumer, ceteris paribus. To simplify, the reaction of a consumer to his purchases for goods with respect to any changes in his or her real income is called income elasticity. Demand will be income elastic for non-essential goods, wherein, say, a fallen customer's income would prevent them to make a purchase of a new car, jewelry, etc. Whereas demand will be income inelastic for essential commodities, where not much of the buying pattern would change for such goods, even if the consumer's income changes. Consumers will still buy salt or sugar or bread, whether there's a change in their income. So I'm trying to remember what the actual formula is for this. I think it is elasticity of income is going to be the change in, let's try that Q again, change in quantity demanded. Again, I'm using the Latin symbol delta to represent change over change in income, but we're going to Google that just to make sure I'm not leading you astray. A lot of words, no formulas. Probably because I typed in definition. So change in quantity demand over change in income, voila. Apparently it's instead denoted with the lowercase d. I'd imagine that's a preferential kind of thing, but just in case, I'll change it. And the only thing I would have added is kind of what our junior tutor touched on here. It's a very good point. Demand will be income elastic for non-essential goods. So if you want to think like you have a huge cut in your income, you still need to pay for housing probably. So essential goods like housing, groceries, food are going to be income inelastic. I don't want to say no matter your income, but you will still buy that even if your income is cut. Whereas things that are more elastic might be like new clothes or video games or things you don't really need, things that are luxuries that you can get because of what your income is. Honestly, they probably explain that better than me off the top of my head, but give it the good old college try. So I'm going to say excellent answer. That's correct. And we can move on to question 10. And question 10 reads, what does the money market graph show? Our junior tutor has written that it shows the relationship between the nominal interest rate and the quantity of money. Money supply curve is vertical. This is because the Fed sets a supply of money without consideration of the price of money. And the money demand curve is downward sloping. So if I remember correctly, this is going to be like interest rates. This is going to be the quantity of money. I don't know if we denote that Q or not. And money supply is vertical. And money demand is downward sloping. And as a result, the interest rate is like EI maybe, is set there. I'm gonna take a look at this just to make sure I'm drawing it right for you guys. So we've got money supply, money demand, got the EI backwards. It's close and that counts for something. So interest rate, I forget what the E denotes, and this is going to be the Q of money, quantity of money. So of course, in our case here in Canada, the Bank of Canada is going to set the money supply. That's why it's vertical. I know in the United States with the recession, I'm trying to again, the recession caused by the pandemic, what they did was print a lot of money in order to sort of try to inject the economy. I believe we've done the same thing in Canada. So when that happens, the money supply is going to increase. And interest rates are going to decrease. And we'll call that IE prime and QE prime. So in a recession, people will spend less and try to save more because they don't have confidence in the economy. So when they increase the money supply like this, what they're trying to do is inject the economy with cash to keep people spending. I believe recently the Bank of Canada lowered the overnight interest rates and plans to keep it low until at least 2023, which is consistent with increasing the money supply, which is typically done in a recession. This low interest rate is good for homeowners in particular, because I think mortgage rates right now are like to the tune of like 1.8% or so, which is a pretty stark contrast to, I believe, the 80s when like my parents were looking at an interest rate of like 19% or something on the mortgage, something horrendous. So in some ways, homeowners that were not overly affected by the pandemic, i.e. didn't lose their job, may be doing better off because of it. And I think that's actually what's happening in the data, is that people that already had a decent amount of money are still doing well. and people that weren't doing as well were the ones that tended to lose their jobs and are now doing worse. That was a tangent for sure. Back to the question. Shows the relationship between yeah. I don't think I have anything else to add. This is the money market graph. That's correct. Good work. Question 11, I believe this is our second last question, but could be wrong. And question 11 reads, how do you calculate marginal revenue? And we have by dividing, our junior tutor, has said, by dividing the change in total revenue by the change in total output. Change in total revenue by change in output. Yeah, so I guess if change in total revenue of one more unit divided by the change in output of one additional unit, so you sell one more, the revenue you get from that one more. So I think that makes sense. I'm going to Google it just to make sure because I don't know, I haven't thought about this in a long time. Change in total revenue by the change in total output quantity. So maybe a better way for me to write this here would be Q. Yeah, so I guess we graph this, got Q, P, as Q increases, obviously our total revenue increases. And right now, our total revenue is going to equal Q times P. And if we were to add one additional unit, then change in Q, say if we have one more unit. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So say here we've got like 10 of whatever, and I don't think P is the right thing down on this axis actually, and I think we'll call this like revenue. So when we're selling 10, I don't know, water bottles, got a revenue of $40, and when we now sell our 11th water bottle, our revenue now is like $42. So our change in total revenue here would be equal to 2 minus 40. We would divide that by our change in quantity. So that is going to be 11 minus 10. Doing the necessary subtractions. We see 2 over 1. So our marginal revenue would be $2. And here I've drawn the relationship between quantity sold and revenue to be linear. That's not always the case. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's not always the case. You can have diminishing marginal revenue, which I think is usually the case, or you could also have increasing marginal revenue over time. Probably. So I'm going to say that's correct. And we can move on to what I believe is the last question. Question 12. And question 12 reads as follows. An increased equilibrium price and a decreased try that again. An increased equilibrium price and a decreased equilibrium quantity result from a or an decrease in demand, increase in demand, increase in supply, or decrease in supply. And our junior tutor has written D, the decrease in supply. And the explanation reads as follows. The law of demand and supply illustrates how demand and supply are associated with each other and how that association influences the price of goods and services. It is a basic economic principle that when supply exceeds demand, the prices of goods and services tend to decline, but when demand exceeds supply, the prices of goods and services tend to increase. So if the demand for the goods and services remains unchanged, supply and prices of the goods and services share an inverse relationship. With the increase in the supply of goods and services, the prices will decline to a lower equilibrium price and higher equilibrium quantity of goods and services. With a decrease in the supply of goods and services, the prices will increase to a higher equilibrium price and lower equilibrium quantity of goods and services. Similarly, if the supply of goods and services remain unchanged, higher demand leads to a higher equilibrium price and higher equilibrium quantity, and lower demand leads to a lower equilibrium price and lower equilibrium quantity. What I'm going to do is just graph all 4 examples here. And I think maybe that's the best way for us to show the difference. So I'm going to draw QP. I hope this doesn't get too ugly, but we'll see. All right, so we've got 4 graphs here. For all of them, we're going to draw our initial equilibrium of supply and demand. And at this initial equilibrium, we're going to have what we call our Q star and our P star. And those are, of course, the equilibrium price and quantity. Almost there, bear with me. So we've got Q star and P star. Q star and P star. Okay, and what we can do here is run through all 4 of our potential options. So we'll call this one A, this guy B, this little buddy C, and we'll call the last one B. So first, they want to show a decrease in demand. So a decrease would be consistent with the demand curve being shifted to the left. So we've got a decrease in demand, and as a result, we can see that our equilibrium price is going to fall, and our equilibrium quantity is going to fall. And we're moving from this point here, moving down to this point here. So what happened? So for A, price fell, and quantity fell. B, an increase in demand. So instead, we're going to shift our demand curve to the right because we've got an increase in demand and the result of an increase in demand. And of course, this is ceteris paribus, meaning all else equal, meaning the supply is not changing when we're moving the demand. Here, we can see that our new equilibrium is going to be up here. And we see that this leads to, try that again. We see that this leads to a higher price and a higher quantity. Scenario C, an increase in the supply. This is going to be, oh, let me try that again. That was terrible. This is going to be consistent with supply curve shifting right, like so. As a result, under new equilibrium, we see that the quantity is increased, but the price has decreased, and we've moved from this original point down to this point here. So we're going to say price down and quantity up. And the last scenario would be a decrease in supply. This is going to be the supply curve shifting to the left. And when this happens, supply curve shifting left. And when this happens, we see that our quantity is going to fall, but our price is going to increase. So we've got P up and quantity down. So as a result, an increased equilibrium price and a decreased equilibrium quantity. So we're looking for the scenario where price is up and quantity is down. That looks consistent with D, a decrease in supply to me, and our junior tutor has come to the same answer. Trying to think if there's anything else I'd want to add to that. I don't really think so. Maybe one distinction to make is sometimes you read change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied, and sometimes you'll read change in demand or change in supply. They're different. Change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied is consistent with a change in price. And what that looks like is instead of shifting the curve like we did in these graphs, it's instead of movement along the curve. And when we hear change in supply, change in demand, there's a number of reasons that could happen. Off the top of my head, maybe technology improves and we can now supply more output for the same amount of input. That would be consistent with the supply curve moving to the right. Say, I don't know, if there's a strike and a lot of the workers at your company stop working, that would be consistent with a supply decrease as there's nobody to make the products. Changes in demand, kind of the stories are like, I don't know, say you're an artist, you've got a song that blows up, you're going to be in a lot higher demand after that. And I'm sure you can make something up for the decrease in demand as well. So we're going to say, excellent answer. That's correct. And I think that was the last one. It was. Yeah, so those are all the questions for today. If you enjoyed today's question and answer and you'd like to be notified of when we do this next, you would hit the subscribe button and the notification bell below. If you'd like to submit your own questions, visit the links in the description. Remember to leave a like and comment and share this video with your friends. This has been Kevin from OneClass.